Hey guys, welcome back to MassiveSynth.com tutorials. Make sure you get yourself subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ADSRtuts if you're not subscribed already. This is the video 3 or part 3 of the kind of house music production feature we've been doing this month. Just some production tips and techniques for producing kind of deep house or tech house or deep tech tunes. So in parts 1 and 2 we put these drums together and these kind of bass sounds and this kind of arp as well, using Massive for these synths. And in this tutorial is going to look at some kind of sidechaining and some creative sidechaining, just producing these sounds up a little bit, these synth sounds really, and also making a quick sub bass as well in Massive, just to kind of take care of the real low end in this tune. And then in the final part we'll get to producing up these drums and just adding a bit of warmth and kind of analog vibe to the loop. So let's start off with this bass line, and let's just kind of solo everything else for now. Just have this bass and this kick drum playing. So one thing I want to get into first is just looking at the EQ on this bass and just do a little kind of, well, high pass really, but solo this bass. Just take this kind of, around sort of 60 hertz, take that out as well, because if we look at this kick drum, a lot of that energy in the kick drum's there, and so we can roll it out of the bass line and then just add it back in using a sub. So let's do a little kind of quite a steep slope, 48 dB really, and just kind of quite tight, just cuts everything off below that sort of frequency range. So if I go up to about 100 hertz, I start to lose too much out of the bass line. I start to lose all the warmth. I just want to really just get rid of those real low frequencies. And then if we put this kick drum back in, you can see the kick drum and the bass line are sort of peaking at different frequencies. Kick drum's peaking around 60 hertz. And the bass line's more about 100, 150. So we're not going to have too many clashing frequencies in that low end really. So next thing we can look at this bass line is just compressing it a little bit. So I'm going to load up the FabFilter Pro C. And going to look at the classic style here, just for that kind of more, I guess the classic style is a little bit more aggressive, a bit more bitey, but maybe a bit more in tune with some kind of older sort of vintage bits of kit. So let's start off, set a medium attack and release, push this threshold right up so we're not compressing to start with, and let's set a ratio of around 3:1. The attack and release down a bit. Let's pull this threshold down until we start to get about 4 to 6 dB of gain reduction. So we can see the compressor's kind of compressing about 4 to 6 dB. And we've just got this moderate attack and release time, so the compressor is kind of recovering in between notes. Bypass. So yeah, it's just sort of firming up the kind of the shape of the bass really a little bit, and just sort of bringing it to the front a bit more, making it a little bit fuller, because the way we set up that bass line, we're not kind of re-triggering the phases or anything, so we're getting quite a lot of jumpy sort of levels in here. So it's just taking care of some of those without being too aggressive. I mean, I would tweak the output, but I don't think we're not sort of losing or gaining too much by applying the compressor, so don't really need to look at that. The next thing really is some sidechain. So first thing I want to do is I want to set up a sidechain. So I'm going to bounce the kick drum out as audio, And then the reason I always use audio for sidechains is because I can really edit the tail of these sidechains, because I don't want it too long, this trigger. Just cut it down to something like that, should be fine. Put it on an audio channel here because it's a piece of audio, and then just duplicate this sidechain trigger across this loop. Like so, rename it. And let's start sidechaining this baseline. So one thing I look at when I'm sidechaining, really, if we look at this multimeter here, kicks peaking minus 8.7 dB. And once I add the bass to that, you know, we're going up to sort of an extra kind of 5 dB really, with the bass adding on top, and we're just losing all that headroom. So we want to get some of that headroom back. So sidechain setup, no output, so we're just using that trigger. And then let's just insert a compressor on this baseline. Select the sidechain option to the sidechain trigger we just set up. Go for some really fast attack and release times here. Ratio of about, I tend to go about 3:1. Sharpen up the knee a bit maybe. Take this auto gain off and just keep the gain here at 0 dB. Convert it to peak. It's maybe at minus 20 and the threshold is maybe a bit too much. And with that really kind of short tail on the sidechain trigger, it's not too obvious that we're sidechaining that baseline, but we are actually doing about 8 to 10 dB, the kind of gain reduction on. If you look here as well, the master output, we've actually kind of saved ourselves about 3 or 4 dB in the headroom there. So next thing we can look at is some more creative sidechaining on this bus channel with this tape delay here. So I'm going to insert this same compressor onto this bus. So this tape delay, the delay on the bass line basically is going to be sidechained to the kick drum as well. But also one thing I wanted to do is sidechain this tape delay to the bass line itself, so we're not getting any kind of delay notes interfering with the bass notes themselves and kind of muddying them up. So before this kind of kick drum sidechain here, I'm going to set up another compressor, and with this bass sound here, I'm going to actually send almost like just a trigger signal basically to this bus channel. Turn the amount up, and then this bus channel, no output, and then we can just put bass sidechain, rename it there, then go back to bus 1 and set up in this compressor, set the sidechain feature to bus 2, which is our bass send, and then just set up a kind of similar sort of sidechain compressor to the one we did before. So fast attack and release, 3:1 on the ratio, convert it to peak, auto gain off, sharpen up this knee a bit, and now this compressor, which is on the tape delay channel, is responding to the bass notes. So we're only getting the delay in between the bass notes, which is just going to kind of, it just makes it a bit less muddy, cleans it up, a bit more rhythmic as well. Put the kit back in. So I've noticed now actually, because we've done this kind of low end roll off on the bass and kind of lost all that low frequency, we lost a little bit of warmth out of the sound. So let's get that back by creating a kind of sub bass line in here really, and use Massive to do this. So we can go for mono, keep this bass in mono. One thing I want to do is just copy these MIDI notes for the bass line into this new massive patch we've created here. And we want to use a sine wave for this bass sound. I'm just going to take the pitch down by 2 octaves as well to get into that sub frequency range around 60 Hertz. And then I'm going to mute the notes that clash with the kick drum here, and then just tweak this kind of amp envelope as well. So let's back this attack off slightly, back the release off as well, because you're getting a slight little clip with the sound. And then let's do a low pass filter here as well, kind of 48 dB slope, and just roll all those kind of, if there's any kind of mids or highs in there, there won't be much with the sine wave, but there will be a little bit, and we'll just roll it off so we're only getting the sub frequencies on this bass sound here. So roll it off to about 75. Remember, with this bass sound, got about a sort of 75, 70 roll off, so you know we're not going to have any clashing frequencies basically. And unmute and mute it back, that sub back in. We're kind of bringing that warmth back into the sound a little bit. So one thing I want to do here as well with these MIDI notes is just the tail of them will clash with the kick drum a little bit, I think. So I'm just going to shorten these ever so slightly, and then let's just solo the sub and the kick, and then copy this sidechain compressor here that we got on the bass, copy it over to the sub. If we remember the kick drum on its own at minus 8.7 dB, so add that sub back in. Not losing too much headroom there with that sub in there. So we're all good really. Put the bass back in, maybe just drop the sub level a little bit. So we kind of added a sub back in, we've kept plenty of headroom in there, and just sidechain that bass and the delay as well. So final thing I want to look at really is this kind of Arp sound. So we can start by doing the obvious with this and just kind of do a low end roll. Tend to stop rolling those frequencies off when the kind of like the EQ gets a bit obvious, because you don't want to lose everything that's sort of nice and warm about the sound. So I'm just getting it out of the way so there's nothing down here in the sound that's going to interfere with the sub or bass or the kick drum in there. So and what we could actually do, just to bring it out a little bit, sometimes rather than using an EQ, I might use an exciter. So Ozone 5's exciter, although it's a mastering tool, it can be quite creative for mix down stuff as well. So the tape mode on here is really nice, although is quite extreme, so you have to be really careful with it. So if I just look at this kind of frequency range here, you know, it's sort of like the kind of the mids, the higher mids really. So just a small amount in here, you can hear how much of an effect it's having. So I'm going to go really subtle with this, about 0.7, 0.8. Just pull this mix down as well. So it's just adding quite a nice amount of sort of brightness in there without it being too harsh or anything. It's sounding quite nice. And then we just want to add a bit of a sidechain compressor onto this Arp as well. Maybe go back and just solo the ARP and then the kick and sidechain trigger. And it's just a bit too much extreme, like that sidechain. I think if we take it off, we're not really losing much headroom anyway, so can have it on there. But just take this threshold right up, take it to about minus 10 dB. So we're only getting 4 or 5 dB gain reduction. So the effect is a bit less obvious. It's still kind of keeping that headroom in there, but it's just a bit less kind of obvious sidechain. You know, we don't really want that sort of effect to this kind of track. So okay, so the tune's starting to come together a little bit more there with just some kind of sidechain production on the bass and the synths and stuff. So I think part 4, the final part of this tutorial, we'll look at the drums again, we'll look at processing these drums and just adding a little bit of kind of warmth and just using some tape sims and some more kind of bus compression really to just beef those drums up a little bit more. So yeah, make sure you come back and check us out for part 4. Any questions about this tutorial, please get in touch, let us know. Any feedback or any stuff you'd like to see going forward with the stuff, the kind of subscriber video content we're providing on massivesynth.com. Just let us know, we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, make sure you go and check out the website, get on the forum, massivesynth.com. Tons more tutorials about the synth, making various different sounds using Massive, so go and check it out. Alright, cheers.
Oh my God.